I went from school teacher to chairman of the board of a big company for the sake of revenge. When I was a little boy, my father, Lee Chan, was my entire world. A towering figure who seemed to hold the universe together with his bare hands. He wasn't just a father. He was a force of nature, a man who wove dreams into reality with the stubborn grit of someone who'd clawed his way up from nothing. Born in a small village outside Busan, he'd grown up sharing a single room with 5 siblings, his parents scraping by on a fisherman's wages. Yet even as a kid, Dad had a spark, an unyielding hunger to build something better. By the time I knew him, he was a whirlwind of ambition and soul, juggling multiple jobs to keep our family afloat. He'd race through the city as a delivery driver, weaving his beat-up van through Gangnam's neon-lit chaos, then pull graveyard shifts at a 7-Eleven, ringing up soju and ramyeon for late-night wanderers. On weekends, he tutored high schoolers in math, his chalk-stained fingers scribbling equations with a patience I'd later inherit. All this, while grinding through law school at night, his textbooks dog-eared, his desk a battlefield of coffee mugs and highlighters under the dim glow of a flickering lamp. But Dad's real magic was in his side hustles. With 2 old college friends, he'd built 2 small businesses from the ground up. Brightbuild, a construction firm that started with patching leaky roofs and grew to erecting mid-rise apartments, and Chan's Wheels, a corner auto parts shop in Itaewon where mechanics swapped stories over greasy countertops. These weren't flashy enterprises, but they were his. I remember sneaking into the shop as a kid, the air thick with the smell of motor oil, Dad laughing with customers while slipping me a candy from his pocket. One day, June, he'd wink, "This'll all be yours to dream with." Those businesses were his proof that a man could shape his own fate, no matter how heavy the odds. Yet, no matter how brutal his days, Dad always came home to us. Our apartment in Uedo was modest, peeling wallpaper, a creaky floor, but with him it felt like a fortress. He'd kick off his dusty work boots, drop his bag and scoop me up, spinning me until I shrieked, my laughter bouncing off the walls. "My little general," he'd call, ruffling my hair before pulling Mom Hae-yun into a hug that made her blush. Over steaming bowls of doenjang jjigae, he'd listen to her gossip about the ajumas at the market, his eyes crinkling with warmth. For my twin brothers, Min and So, barely toddlers then, he'd kneel by their crib, singing lullabies in a voice so soft it seemed to wrap them in light. In those moments, Seoul's gray sprawl vanished, and our home was the center of the world. That world cracked when I was 8. The diagnosis hit like a monsoon. Stage 4 stomach cancer, a thief that stole Dad piece by piece. I didn't grasp the science, metastasis, prognosis, chemotherapy, but I felt its shadow in Mom's silence, in the way she stared at cold tea, her hands trembling. Dad fought with everything he had. Even as pain gnawed him hollow, he'd joke about the hospital's bland rice porridge, promising we'd all pile into his van for a Jeju Island adventure, as soon as I'm back on my feet. But his body betrayed him. His broad shoulders shrank, his voice faded to a rasp, and soon he was tethered to a bed, a ghost of the man who'd once tossed me skyward. Mom and I became fixtures in his hospital room, its beige walls closing in with the hum of monitors and the sting of antiseptic. My brothers were too young to understand, so I'd read them bedtime stories while Mom sat by Dad, her hand clutching his. The end came slowly, then all at once. My last memory of him alive burns like a brand. He was a tangle of tubes, his chest barely rising, his face so gaunt I could trace the bones beneath. The doctors said his mind was unraveling, memories slipping like sand through a sieve. I stood by his bed, my throat tight, whispering, "Dad, it's June. Do you know me?" He couldn't speak, couldn't move, but his lips curved into a faint, flickering smile. That smile was his last gift, a beacon saying, "I'm still here, son." Days later he fell into a coma. He woke only once, his eyes finding Mom's for a final goodbye, his breath fading as she held him close. After Dad, life was a jagged edge. Mom, a housewife who'd poured her soul into us, was left with 3 kids and no anchor. Dad's businesses were meant to be our safety net, but without him they seemed to limp. We moved to a shoebox apartment in Nowon, its thin walls leaking the sounds of neighbors' lives. Arguments, laughter, everything we'd lost. Mom pored over bills late at night, her fingers shaking as she tried to decipher ledgers Dad once handled with ease. The twins, 5 years old, kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and I'd choke out lies about him being on a trip, hating myself for it. Then came my grandfather, Kim Tae Soo, a man who wore his self-importance like armor. A retired banker with a voice that could silence a room, he strode into our grief like a general claiming a battlefield. Tall, with a face carved from stone and eyes that judged more than they saw, he was the quintessential boomer, Every story circled back to his triumphs, his connections, his wisdom. When Dad died, Grandpa didn't grieve, he postured. He penned Dad's obituary for the Seoul Daily, not to honor him but to parade him. My son was first in his class, he wrote, rattling off Dad's grades, his law school admission, his businesses as if they were medals pinned to his own chest. I was just a kid, but I felt the betrayal. Dad wasn't a resume. He was the man who taught me to tie my shoes, who danced with Mom in the kitchen to old trot songs, who'd drawn silly faces on my lunchbox napkins. Mom was drowning, bills piling up, no job, 3 mouths to feed. Grandpa saw his chance. One evening, over a tense dinner at his pristine Gangnam condo, he leaned back, swirling a glass of soju. "Hey-yun, you're not cut out for business," he said, his tone dripping with pity. "Chan's companies need a steady hand, mine. Let me take over and I'll keep you afloat." Mom, her eyes red from crying, nodded. She had no choice. He was Dad's father, family, a lifeline in a storm. We were Korean. Filial piety ran deep, and questioning elders felt like blasphemy. But the years that followed were leaner than we'd imagined. Brightbuild and Chan's wheels sent us dribbles, never enough to breathe easy. Mom threw herself into survival, cleaning offices until dawn, stitching clothes for neighbors, hawking kimchi and banchan at the local market, her hands chapped and bleeding. I watched her shrink, her laughter replaced by a quiet, desperate strength. Grandpa insisted the businesses were barely scraping by. "This is all there is," he'd say, handing Mom envelopes so light they mocked us. Yet he never seemed to want. His suits were tailored, his watch gleamed, and he'd brag about golf games with important men at exclusive clubs. Still, he offered to fund our schooling, and we clung to that mercy. I hustled for scholarships, easing his burden, but Min and So leaned on his generosity. We were grateful, or so we thought, bowing our heads like good kids raised to respect their elders. Life became a grind. I graduated and became a history teacher at a high school in Mapo, standing before teens who'd rather scroll TikTok than hear about the Goryeo dynasty. The job was tough, lesson plans, grading, parent meetings, but I loved it. It felt like carrying Dad's torch, his belief that knowledge could lift you up. Min and So, meanwhile, soared at medical school. So was a prodigy, her professors marveling at her precision. They said she'd be a surgeon who'd save lives with those steady hands. Min dove into psychiatry, fascinated by the mind's shadows, his quiet empathy a mirror of Dad's. They were chasing dreams Dad would have cheered for, even if his absence left a hole no degree could fill. Then came the gut punch. Grandpa and Grandma, steeped in old-world sexism, decided So's ambition was a sin. At a family dinner, Grandma's voice sliced through the clink of chopsticks. "Why waste money on medical school, So? You'll just marry, have babies, and quit." So froze, her chopsticks hovering, but she didn't cry, not yet. Min got it too. Grandpa scoffed at psychiatry as not real medicine. Soon they cut us off, refusing to fund reckless choices. So came to me later, her voice small in our dim living room. "I'll drop out, June, get a job. Mom's killing herself." I pulled her close, my heart splintering. "You're not quitting," I said. "You're too damn good." But inside I was scrambling. My teacher's salary and side tutoring gigs weren't enough to keep us all above water. Salvation came unexpectedly. Park Minho, Dad's old partner at Brightbuild, called me one rainy evening. We met at a Hongdae cafe, its walls plastered with indie band posters, the air thick with espresso and nostalgia. Over mugs of black coffee, Minho's face grew heavy. "June, your grandfather's been robbing you blind," he said. My pulse quickened. He laid it out. Brightbuild wasn't failing, it was booming, landing contracts for shiny new condos across Seoul. But Grandpa, controlling Dad's shares, funneled the profits to himself. He'd lied about the company's struggles, giving us scraps while he banked millions. Worse, he'd hijacked Brightbuild's Gangnam office, a modern building Dad had bought with years of savings. Grandpa forced the company into a crumbling Mapo space, then rented the Gangnam office to SK Construction, a rival, for a fortune. Chan's wheels wasn't spared either. Grandpa skimmed its earnings, leaving the shop barely operational. All this time, while Mom scrubbed floors, while So and Min faced dropping out, while I burned out juggling jobs, Grandpa lived like a king on Dad's blood money. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. Dad had built those businesses for us, for Mom's security, for our futures. Every one Grandpa stole was a piece of Dad's heart, a brick in the life he'd wanted for us. I felt his ghost urging me forward, his voice whispering, "Fix this." June. Grandpa's Achilles heel was his pride. He craved adoration, the image of the benevolent patriarch. I'd tear that mask off, not with anger but with precision. I called a family meeting in our no-one apartment, where Dad's old fishing hat still hung by the door, a quiet reminder of him. Mom sat on our threadbare couch, Min and So cross-legged on the floor. I told them everything, Grandpa's lies, the money, the office. Mom's hands covered her face, tears slipping through. So's eyes blazed and Min, usually soft-spoken, slammed a fist on the coffee table. He used Dad's name, Min said, voice shaking. He doesn't get to do that. We signed a document naming me the estate's representative, our signatures a pact to reclaim what was ours. Next, I met Brightbuild's board, sans Grandpa, in their sad maple office. Flickering bulbs, cracked tiles, a far cry from Gangnam's glass walls. I stood tall, channeling Dad's quiet strength. My father founded this company, I said, sliding our documents across the table. His shares belong to us, his wife, his children. My grandfather was a caretaker, nothing more. I'm taking over. Miss Choi, a sharp-eyed director, nodded slowly. We suspected Tae Soo was skimming, she said. He's been chairman in name only, drawing a salary for nothing. The board agreed. I was the new representative. Step 1 was done. The Gangnam office was thornier. I called Aunt Ji-won and Uncle Suk, Dad's siblings, who lived in a cozy Itaewon flat. Over jasmine tea I spilled the truth, Grandpa's scam, the rival tenants, the betrayal. Ji-won's face hardened. Chan deserved better, she said. They rallied the family and soon cousins and uncles were whispering disapproval. The pressure worked. Grandpa, cornered by shame, evicted SK Construction, returning the office to Brightbuild. Step 2 check. Chan's wheels needed saving too. I visited the shop, its shelves half empty, the sign faded. Mr. Kong, the manager Dad had trusted, was still there, his hair grayer but his loyalty intact. Your grandpa's been bleeding us dry, he admitted, showing me cooked books. I worked with him to redirect profits back to the shop, hiring a new clerk to revive it. Slowly Chan's wheels hummed again, mechanics joking like the old days. The final act was the board meeting. I wanted Grandpa to feel his empire crumble, to see his pride turn to dust. I planned it like a chess game, every move deliberate. The conference room was prepped, polished table, city skyline gleaming outside. I had the board position Grandpa's chairman chair backward, a silent checkmate. When he strode in, all swagger and self-assurance, he froze. The directors sat stone-faced, staring. I spun the chair, meeting his gaze. June? His voice wavered, his face ashen. What the hell is this? This is justice, I said, standing. You're done. The company, my family, we don't need you. I represent Dad's estate now. He flailed, voice rising. Ungrateful. I paid for your school, your brother's school. I saved you all. I stepped closer, my words a blade. No, Grandpa. Dad did. That was his money, his dreams. You just stole them. Silence choked the room. Grandpa's mouth twitched, but no words came. He'd built his life on control, on being the untouchable patriarch. Now he was nothing. He shuffled out, his shadow small against the glass doors. I didn't stay chairman, I wasn't ready and I knew it. Instead, I took a bookkeeper's job at Brightbuild, a quiet desk where I could guard Dad's legacy. My first move was hiring Mom as office manager, a role with dignity and a paycheck she'd earned 1,000 times over. She walked into the Gangnam office that first day, her head high, and I saw a spark of the woman who danced with Dad years ago. Grandpa's world collapsed. Without the company, he's a ghost in his own life, haunting a sterile condo with no one to boast to. Grandma, fed up with his narcissism, sleeps in a separate room, her patience long gone. He's friendless, his allies were just props for his ego. I hear he sits alone, flipping through TV channels, his reflection a stranger. I don't wish him pain, but I hope he feels the weight of what he broke. We're rebuilding. Mom's laugh is back, softer but real. So's interning at Severance Hospital, her scalpel steady, her future bright. Min's diving into psychiatric research, his empathy a gift Dad would have loved. I teach, vote on Brightbuild's board and walk by Chan's wheels sometimes, its sign repainted, alive again. The Gangnam office shines, a beacon of Dad's dreams. I feel him in its halls, his chuckle, his warmth, his faith in us. We did it, Dad. We brought you home.